have only been on this planet for 12 to 10,000 years, then whose history should you be studying? Whose God concepts should you be studying? Whose science and philosophy and medicine and healing and architecture and engineering should you be studying? Know yourself, love yourself. And once you learn to love yourself, it's a totally different ball game. Totally different ball game. It's the only game in town.
Knowing yourself, loving yourself. Why don't people? Why do people choose to do the opposite? Or what? Or if they don't conscientiously choose it, what is the force that drives an individual to not do so?
So, brother David, it ain't a choice, it's socialization. We are socialized to be who we are, right? Most people are a byproduct of the household they grew up in. So you look at the parents. What did the parents know? And the bottom line is we only know what we know. So who's responsible for teaching you what you know? And what you know determines how far you're going to grow, how far you're going to go. So if you restrict people's access to information, then you guarantee that they will always be in a subservient position. So it's about education. It's about knowing yourself. And as I stated earlier, you cannot expect your former or current oppressor to teach you what you need to know. It's not in their best interest. So it's about being willing. It's about being willing to be quiet and listen to and learn from your elders. Right? You got 2 ears and 1 mouth for a reason. You should listen twice as much as you speak. Right? You should be listening for people who are talking about something. Right? You should be learning from them. Right? And then you should be applying the lessons that you've been taught so that you know what works, what's valuable. And those things that work should be amplified and spread amongst your community so that you can come together in cohesive groups, amplify your power, and move faster than you ever could before. So it's a socialization process, and once those processes have been developed, then you produce the system that will socialize other people starting as young as possible. Frederick Douglass said it's better to raise a child than to repair broken men. Right? And most of us are broken. Don't know that we're broken. Thinking that we are that, have no idea of where we are and what our potential is. So I've always valued being in the presence of elders, learning from them, listening to them, and learning from them, watching them, and then doing those things that I saw added value to their life, so that by me doing it, it will add value to my life. And then I can model that for those who are looking for someone to model their lives after. That's what everybody has the opportunity and the responsibility of doing. So as we begin the process of creating a socialization process that's going to enhance our ability to function as human beings on this planet, we all can and should be investing in ourselves for the rest of our lives.
Give it up for that. How do you feel about Earth, Wind, and Fire?
How much time you got? So I came of age in the 60s. So I'm an R&B guy, right? Grew up in Chicago. Right. And right now. And I like good music. I like good music that has a beat. I like musicians that know how to play music. I like writers who write lyrics that add value to your life. And I appreciate performers who can bring all of that together in an entertaining package. And so when I think about the music that I like, Earth, Wind, and Fire is at the top of my list, right? And one of the reasons why I have so much um, affinity for Earth, Wind, and Fire is because of Maurice White, right? And Maurice White's vision. Maurice is from Memphis, and after he graduated from high school, he moved to Chicago to live with his mom and her mom's new husband. And it was there in Chicago that he became involved in the music industry. He worked at Chess Records, was a session drummer at Chess Records. He played on some of the biggest hits that were produced by the Chess brothers. He teamed up with Ramsey Lewis and was a drummer for Ramsey Lewis. And then he ran into this brother from Chicago by the name of Phil Karan, who used to perform with Sun Ra, right? And Phil Karan was performing in Chicago, and he played this African thumb piano called the Maurice was standing in the wings. He saw that instrument, and then he went out to a pawn shop and bought one. Right? So one of the things that was happening in Chicago in the '60s was that you had musicians that were real musicians, and that were also steeped in their culture. So you had groups of artists on the south side of Chicago who were studying Kemet, who were studying African history, who were finding ways to incorporate what they were learning about Africa in their music. So there was a group called the Pharaoh, right? You had Sun Ra in Chicago. You had Ramsey Lewis in Chicago. So Maurice White was steeped in all of these influences that reference Nile Valley culture and civilization. So Maurice had this vision of using music as a means to transform the consciousness of people. Sound, using sound frequency, sound vibration. And so he had this idea of creating a group based on his astrological signs, astrological elements in his signs, earth, wind, and fire. So he told Ramses he was going to lead the group. He was going to go out to LA and start his own thing. Ramsey thought he was crazy, thought he was nuts, but Maurice grabbed his younger brother, Verdine, and they went to the West Coast, and over time they formed Earth, Wind, and Fire. And to pay a debt to Ramsey Lewis, then Maurice White wrote a song that became one of Ramsey's biggest hits, Sun Goddess.
Yeah.
All right? Yeah. So what really endeared me to Maurice White was in 1977 when I was coming into consciousness, when I was really beginning to understand the value of African history and culture. Maurice White was, at the time, 2 years prior, they had done an album that was produced and arranged by this very talented musician from Chicago by the name of Charles Stepney. Charles Stepney worked with Rotary Connection. He worked with Minnie Riperton. He worked with the Dales and a whole host of R&B groups. Brilliant musician, and he helped to formulate the Earth, Wind, and Fire sound. And they were working on an album together when he died. And so Maurice then dedicated that album to Charles Stepney. That album is called Spirit. And if you look at the cover of that album, you'll see 3 pyramids. You'll see the 9 members of the group forming 3 pyramids. And every Earth, Wind, and Fire album since then has said Kemetic imagery. Wow. So Maurice White in 1977 did his All in All album, right? Which I talk about in the book. The artwork from that album cover, the front and the inside cover, is a phenomenal work of art that speaks to the all in all, the ancestral intelligence that exists within us. It speaks to the cultural legacy of Kemet, Nile Valley culture and civilization. And it speaks to the means by which African knowledge has been spread, has been disseminated all over the world, and it's influenced other people. And so what I found in Maurice White was a validation for what I was beginning to find joy in. That is joy and love in African people, African history, African culture, African music. And Maurice we were just, I was just in sync with what he was doing. And I'm pleased to say that on June the 3rd, Questlove is going to be screening at a New York, the Tribeca Film Festival, this new documentary on Earth, Wind, and Fire, right? On June the 3rd. So I'm sure it will be making its way to theaters or cable in the very near future. And so what that means to me is that the music, the message, and the metaphysics of Earth, Wind, and Fire and Maurice White are going to be spread to a new generation and a new audience. But what Maurice said in an interview he had done in the Chicago Sun-Times in 1977 when that All in All album came out, he said that his music was esoteric and exoteric.
Yes.
He had devised two ways of reaching his audience. The music had a beat, an infectious beat that would make people want to get up on their feet on the dance floor and shake the groove thing, right? Excite you in that way, but he also had messages in the music that when you listen to the harmonies, when you read the lyrics, which were always included in every album, you would understand the deeper message that Maurice was imparting in his songs. Give you one case in point, and then I see you keep checking the clock, so we go on the clock and we'll sign books in a few minutes. So let me give you a case in point regarding one of Earth, Wind, and Fire's biggest albums, which came out in 1975. It was the soundtrack to one of the worst movies ever made. That's The Way of the World. Terrible movie, wow, but a great soundtrack, right? And so if you think about the chorus to the title song, Hearts of Fire create love, desire to take you higher, higher to your place on the throne. Hearts of Fire create love, desire to the world you belong. What was Maurice saying? Maurice was talking about the esoteric chakras within the body, the esoteric power centers within the body. So there are 7 chakras in the body. And the idea is to move your energy from the lower chakra, the root chakra, into your 4th chakra, the heart chakra. And once you can raise that energy to the heart chakra, which is the chakra, the energy of love, hearts of fire create love, desire to take you higher, higher to your place on the throne, the crown chakra. So Maurice White was telling those who had ears to hear about your metaphysical anatomy, about your spiritual anatomy. And the crown chakra in Christianity is the halo that you saw above Jesus' head. It's the Christ consciousness, right? So what Maurice was doing, using Columbia Records dime, was to impart information that would be life transforming for those people who are ready to have their lives transformed. Now, the reality is not everybody wants to have their life transformed. Some people are happy functioning with their energy at the lower chakras, at the root chakra, if you know what I mean. And when you listen to this stuff that folk call music now, you know it's all geared toward the lowest chakra, the absolute lowest chakra. And that's why folk is shaking their heads, wondering what's wrong with these children. What's wrong with these children is what's coming into their ears. And the record industry, the people who control the record industry, know this. And that's why they produce and promote music, or what some people call music, that's designed to keep that energy at the lowest level, the material level. It's all about sex, it's about drugs, it's about violence, right? That's what's been promoted for the last 25, 30 years. That's why we have 2, 3 generations of folk who have lost their minds. But House of Fire create love, desire. that will take you higher and higher if you understand what you're listening to. Everything that comes into your body, whether you hear it, read it, see it, eat it, changes you on a molecular level, alters your DNA, right? And I talk about that in the introduction of the book. Whatever comes into your body alters you on a genetic level. And so epigenetics is a new field of genetics, which is changing people's perception of reality. The belief used to be that genetic changes would not occur until maybe 2 or 3 generations after the effect was introduced. But now geneticists know that what you are introduced to will change you in a minute, in a heartbeat, in a heartbeat. So everything you think right now, everything you eat right now, everything you read, everything you listen to, everything that you see affects you on a cellular level and changes your genetic makeup. And those changes will be passed on to your offspring immediately. That's how serious this thing is. That's how serious this thing has always been. And once you understand this level of seriousness, then you have an option of learning how to be the best you possible or fall victim to the traps that are laid out here in order to ensure that you do nothing, and you do nothing very well for the rest of your life.
So, but before I ask, we will be taking questions from the audience. We will have 5 individuals to express their questions. So get that formulated in your mind. The first 5 people that get to ask their question will have that, and then we'll transition over to the signing table. I wanted to ask this question because you told me to ask you this question, so I'm gonna honor that. I'm gonna honor the elder.
Okay.
We have a T-shirt that's available on the table, and so when I was setting up the table, I went over. I was like, "Hey, Dr. Browder, we'd love to send this gift to you." And immediately he looked on it and was able to name the individual that was on the shirt. And so I was like, "Oh," he was like, "Well, hey, bring that up, and I'm gonna talk about who that is and why he's important." So, who is it? And tell us why he's important.
But you gotta get the shirt. Come on now.
I'll give it up for Darius. He's co-owner of Bookstore. Bam! This is Le Shirt. This shirt is actually designed by a very special individual, a pastor here in this church, Shrine of Black Madonna, our Brother Aswad. Designed these shirts back in the 90s. He had a brand called Down for the Cause Designs. And he brought these shirts to us, to our store. And he was like, "Yo," he's like, "I see y'all got the merch." He's like, "I'd love to be able," and we were like, "Of course," fits right within our stilo. So here's a visual aid that I'm going to hold up as Dr. Browder shares with us who this individual is and why he's important to our African consciousness.
So if you knew African history, you would know that that's Zoser. That's Zoser. He is the king for whom his prime minister, Imhotep, designed the first man-made structure of stone on the planet. It's called the Step Pyramid of Zoser. The Step Pyramid, a 19-story skyscraper that was built around 2800 BC. 2800 before Caucasians, right? So we know that Imhotep is the world's first architect, the first engineer. He's the first physician in recorded history. He worked for this man, right? He worked for this man. So this is a part of our legacy. This is part of our history. This is part of our culture. And if I knew that information when I was in high school, I would have been an architect as opposed to the person that I am now, because I would have learned about Imhotep. I would have learned about engineering. I would have learned about the hard sciences and wouldn't have the phobia that my 4th grade teacher, the phobia of math that my 4th grade teacher instilled within me. So it's important to know yourself, right? So once you know yourself, you can go anywhere in the world and identify your heritage. Everybody else does that, right? So it's critical to our ability to rise and to shine as a people, to assume responsibility for learning everything we can about the oldest people in the planet. We spend the rest of our lives doing that and still only scratch the surface. So imagine now if you make the love of learning the most important aspect of your life. Imagine how that transforms the lives in your household, in your community, among the lives of the people that you associate with. That's your right. That's your right. Right? And once we begin to align ourselves with those things that are our birthright, to the degree to which we align ourselves to those things is the degree to which we will be free. That's how the process works. Okay?
The scholar, the man, the teacher, Dr. Anthony Browder, picking up form. Remember, questions. We got 5 questions, and then we're going to transition over to the table. So let's start with number 1. Who's the brave individual?
There you go. Yes. Let's see him.
But
We only got
first
time for
question.
one.
Okay.
Make it a good one.
One good question. Is it possible for pharaohs or kings and gods to come alive again and rebuild what they knew in ancient times?
Brother, that's what they've always done. If you really understand the process. Now, I wouldn't use the word pharaoh because pharaoh is an Asiatic word, right? So we have to understand these people from their own standpoint, from their own position, and not from the position of conquerors and enslavers and destroyers. So the essence, the sweet bitty, the sweet bitty is the term that was used to describe the person who lived in Per-Ah. Per-Ah means the great house. So Asiatics took that word Per-Ah and called them Pharaoh, which is the equivalent of calling the president of the United States the White House. Right? It makes no sense once you understand the language. But one of the guiding principles of Kemet was directly tethered to Ma'at, and that is the principle, the concept of the Rehemi Misu, the repetition of the birth. What our ancestors understood in Kemet, in the Nile Valley, and throughout most of Africa is the fact that there is no death. The body is temporary, but the spirit is eternal. The spirit comes back into another body to continue the work, right? So we're here to work. And so it's simply a matter of being able to be socialized in an environment that understands that when a child is born, that child is a returning ancestor. Right? So if the community is tight, then there are people who will be able to identify which ancestor is returning. And so for the kings of Kemet, they understood that to be the philosophical construct for leadership. So many kings were named not after their father, but their grandfathers, because they were the returning ancestor, right? And in West Africa, you find the same thing. There are names in West African culture, Yoruba culture, that speaks to the return of the ancestor, the return of Baba. And so once you begin to be able to wrap your mind around this mind-freeing concept, then it means that our living becomes a self-determining thing. The quality of life that we live is based on the quality of life that we have lived, which is why that scene of the weighing of the soul, where on the day of judgment, the soul of the deceased has to be weighed opposite the feather of my eye. As the soul recites the 42 admonitions of my eye. I have not stolen, I have not robbed, I have not defrauded offerings, I have not done this. 42 declarations of innocence. And to the extent to which that soul has lived a righteous life is the extent to which that soul can live a righteous life in the next life. Right? And so that means that we have control over our destiny. It means that our lives is a continuum. So once you can begin to recalibrate what it means to be alive and to know who, in fact, you are. Who you are is who you were. Who you are is who you're going to be. So we're in a position right now in this life to determine the quality of lives that we'll live in the lifetimes to come. That's power, baby. So you can never expect your oppressor to teach you that information. It ain't in their best interest. So it's about, going back to what I said earlier, it's about knowing yourself. Know who you are. More importantly, know who you are not. Next question.
Right here, brother, yes.
All right. First of all, I want to, man, thank you as much as I possibly can for the work that you've done. Your very first book from the Browder file it came at a pivotal point in my life between what you were writing, Doc Ben, John Henry Clark, all your contemporaries were writing during that time. I grew up in the 90s where hip hop was reflecting what you guys were talking about, made a huge impact on me. But my question is, I was setting the scene. The question is, from the Browder file to now, what do you look back on and say, I didn't get that right, or I wish I had, elaborated on it? So we all involved, right? We think we know what we're talking about when we're talking about it. But from then to now Valley Civilizations to now, what would you say? What area do you think you were wrong or maybe you grew in?
That's a great question. And I often speak to that. I'm at the point in my life now where I have a better understanding of what I thought I knew, right? I knew a lot. I knew a whole lot. And I was writing about what I knew, but now I'm older. And my understanding has evolved. So you go back to the Browder file. I have a poem in the Browder file called Transition 13, right? And that laid a foundation, but I took that poem and upgraded it in the third volume of Browder file, and it's now Transition 14. Because number 14 has greater spiritual significance. My second book, Now Valley Contributions to Civilization, I have a poem in there called Know Thyself, right? And if I were to write that book again, I would change the name of that poem. Not to know thyself, but to know yourself. Why do I say that? I say that because the word thy was popularized by William Shakespeare. Thy, thou, shall, all of those terms were popularized by William Shakespeare in 15th, 16th century, all right? So I got that concept from reading George D. M. James' Stolen Legacy, right? George D. M. James said that the phrase, know thyself, was carved above the entrance to every temple in ancient Egypt. And in all my years of traveling to Egypt, I was always looking for that, and I could never find it. I was asking people, asking Egyptian friends of mine, where is that statement? And it's not there. And then I realized it's not a statement, it's a symbol. And that symbol is above the entrance to every temple in Kemet. It's the Bedet, the Heru Bedet, right? And so what that concept represents is to know yourself. The word thy didn't exist at that time. So it wouldn't be know thyself, know yourself. And so the purpose behind that is you have to know who you are first. Know your ancestry. Know your lineage, your direct family lineage. Know who you are. Know what you've inherited from your parents, from your family members, from your culture. And once you know that, that tells you who you are. And then after you know yourself, then you've got to know for yourself. You got to know externally where you are. Who created this environment? And how does that environment impact you? And then you got to merge the two consciousnesses. You got to merge the two aspects of knowing. So you now know how to move through this life so that you can achieve those things that will make your life better. So that's been part of my evolution, right? I'm not the same person now that I was 5 years ago, right? I'm growing. I'm not the same person now that I will be 5 years from now. That's why I can say, beyond a question of a doubt, my best books are ahead of me because I now have the capacity to synthesize what I thought I knew and to have greater understanding to interpret that and to articulate that such that I can say more and do more with less. I can move more efficiently, right? I don't have to, and that's part of what this whole thing is all about. And that's why in my writings are short, my writings are brief, right? Because if you're writing effectively, you don't have to use a lot of words, right? And because of the fact that I'm trained as an artist, I'm not a writer. I've never taken a writing class before. I'm not a historian. I haven't had any historical training. I'm an artist, right? And so I write like an artist. I use words that will help the reader see what I have written in your mind. And if you can see it in your mind, you can retain the information better. It has more meaning to you. So it's about using my artistic skills to write history, to teach history, and to help people understand the value of history. Because most folk have been socialized because of how we've been educated to hate history. History is more than dates and names and events. History is life. Once you begin to see it from that perspective, then it makes learning history fun. It makes it enjoyable. Yeah. And that's what gives me joy too. Any sisters have questions? I mean, I want a question from a sister. Let's get a question from a sister first, all right? Come on, gotta be a sister here somewhere with the
All
question.
right, so I was like, right here, I'll defer to Elder. Yeah, ma'am.
I want to know about the travel that's coming up, the 3 trips this year. Particularly, I'm interested in the one in December, and I understand that that's the one that is with the solstice again, that you're going to see the solstice where the sun and the moon collide.
Right.
Could you talk a little bit about that trip?
Sure. So initially, I planned to do 2 trips. July trip, July 7th through the 23rd, I think. And then a December trip, that December, 14th through the 23rd, something like that. That was timed to coincide with the winter solstice. In 2019, I was in Egypt working on the excavation, and I happened to be in Egypt during the time of the winter solstice. So the winter solstice is the shortest day of the year. And at Karnak Temple, at Pedasut, Karnak Temple is the largest temple complex ever created, the largest religious complex ever created by human beings on the planet, right? And that temple is the abode of Amen. And Amen is an African word that identifies the unseen presence of God Almighty. And so in Karnak, there's a Holy of Holies in Karnak. And yes, Africans had a Holy of Holies before the Jews did. The Holy of Holies is where Amen resides, the unseen presence of God resides. And that temple was designed in such a fashion that on the winter solstice, which is typically 4 days from December 21st, 22nd, 23rd, and 24th, are the 4 days in which the sun is still. The earth reaches its maximum axial tilt. The sun is still for 4 days. The length of the day does not increase nor decrease, and the sunlight illuminates the Holy of Holies in Pedasut for 4 days. And then on that 5th day, the length of the day begins to increase by 1 minute per day. So 6,000 years ago, on that 5th day, after the winter solstice, which fell on December the 25th, it was said that the sun was born on December the 25th. The sun was born because the length of the day increased by 1 minute per day, and the days got gradually longer. And so all of these concepts have been embedded in the architecture of Pedasut Karnak Temple. So I've always had a love of architecture, and because of the time that I spent, 15 years I spent doing excavations in Egypt, I've gained a lot of familiarity with the architecture on the east and west bank of Luxor. So the tours that I created during the winter solstice gives us an opportunity to do a deeper dive into Kemetic culture and to be there at a spiritually potent time of the year. So that's what the December trip is all about. So These 2 trips were to be my last 2 trips to Egypt. And once folks find out that they were my last 2 trips, those trips filled up. And they filled up, we had a waiting list of like 30 people on each trip. So we decided to do a trip in June. So I added a 3rd trip to accommodate the overflow. So this 3rd trip, which is now the 1st trip, is June the 16th through the 30th, right? And it just so happens that that trip will occur during the summer solstice. So this is the first time that I'll be doing trips to Egypt that bookend both solstices, the summer solstice and the winter solstice. So it's a wonderful way to end my touring career in Egypt. And I don't know what we're gonna do yet, but I know we're gonna do something special. We're gonna go out with a bang. And so as of now, our June trip is booked up because we're less than 60 days out. We still have a few dates left for our July trip. And I was just speaking yesterday with the travel agent about the December trip. And we kind of opened it up to accommodate a few more people. And she told me yesterday that she's going to try to take as many people as we can on that last trip. So right now we got 120 people signed up for that trip. And if we can take more, we'll take more. And then that will be it on that chapter of my life. Doug Barnes, you got some last questions. My friend Doug.
All right, I have a question. With all the mess that's going on in the White House, all the crap that our government's put us through. The thing I want someone to talk on is the fact that, we as Black people are the only non-white people in this country that could probably, I will say probably, never be deported. Can you speak on that?
Okay, 2 ways I can answer that question. One, with all the crap that's happening in the White House right now, or as Julian Malveaux says, all the crap that's happening in the house that enslaved Africans built. Let's have some historical context. All this stuff had to happen. It had to happen. Jeremiah Wright was correct when he talked about this country and all the evil that this country has done to indigenous people, to enslaved Africans, and to people all over the planet. There's a price to be paid for all of that evil. And so this country is going to have to pay that price. And I can't think of a better person for it to happen to than the current occupant of the White House. He is the most imbecilic leader that has ever led or misled a nation. He is a credit to his race, literally. Right? So look at it from that larger perspective and see exactly who and what he is. He is what America deserves.
Yes. Yes.
On its
Yes.
250th birthday.
That's right. That's right.
Because you reap what you sow.
That's right.
Right? He is what they deserve. And so in that light, it's clear to see that white men are scared as hell. That's why they had to do away with GEI. That's why they're definitely afraid of Black women. They're afraid of brown people. They're circling the wagons because they know this is their last rodeo. They know that, right? They are desperate, right? And you have to be careful when you're dealing with desperate people.
That's right.
Because they don't care who they hurt.
No.
Right? So just be aware of that. With regards to your statement about African people not being deported, I think it's just the opposite. I think these devils are playing a long game, and they've been rounding up brown people. They've been deporting brown people. They have signed agreements with African leaders to take some of these brown people. And I personally feel that's a test.
Yes.
Because pretty soon, as they get more desperate and more people begin to rise up and resist, they're going to look at ways to get rid of us.
Yep.
And so in their warped mind's eye, y'all want reparations, we'll send your behind back to Africa. Right? I can see them doing that and knowing that they're not playing fair, they've never played fair, knowing that they have been playing games, it would not put it past me to discover at some point in time in history that the incident that occurred at the Washington Hilton on Saturday was a staged event. Right? It was a setup, right? And that Negro, right, who attempted to assassinate the president, might be a false flag.
Yeah.
He might be a Manchurian candidate.
Yeah.
It might be the justification to make a move on Black folk.
Yeah.
It might be. I don't know, right? It might be. But given that possibility, I'd say that I don't exclude anything from happening. Knowing where I have lived all my life, anything is possible. And what I also know is I can't worry about their stuff. The only thing that I'm concerned about is me and those things that I have direct control of. That's where my attention is. You know, where your attention goes, your energy flows. So focus on those things that you control, right? Brother, you asked a question before that I hadn't addressed about managing your finances. We should not be spending money on things that we don't need. We should not be spending money on things we don't need or people we don't like. We should not be spending our money with folk who don't like us or folk who don't look like us. With this current gas situation being what it is, it should remind everyone that you're going to have to control your appetite. Buy those things that you need. And the things that you can't buy with cash, you don't need. Curb your appetite. Value your time. Your time is your most precious commodity. You'll never get your time back. Never. Use your time wisely. Work in concert with people who are also using their time wisely. Combine your resources and work collaboratively. That's what these times are going to demand if we're going to thrive as a people. We've been surviving for 250 years, and it's time for us to thrive. And we thrive by using all of the resources that we've always had at our disposal. Recognize what you got and use it to life and live your best life possible. That's it. I'm done. Ready to sign some books.